So as you see our wonderful videos here, we have CBS4 and their team to thank for this. And a lot of people don't realize that this relationship has been going on for quite a while, and we hope continues for much longer. It started back in 2002 with Patricia Holcomb. She actually reached out to CBS4, started this important partnership, and today we have her to thank. So it is my pleasure to introduce this team, starting with Tom Mustin. He's been with us for over, well, not from the start, but very long, coming out to our endangered sites, filming and telling the stories with us. CBS puts together a 30-minute special, as well as these little pieces that you see today, and it's actually aired typically in March. So Tom, thank you so much for being such a strong supporter, and come on up. Please join me in welcoming Tom.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's great to be here again. You know, Jennifer went to James Madison University in Harrisonburg, Virginia, which in the small world department is the same place my wife and my sister went to school. So there you go Dukes. And I really like the new hairdo. What do you think, guys? Do you like the new hairstyle with Jennifer? For both of you, clap. Thank you very much. I think it's really good. Appreciate it. Also want to say really quickly what an honor it is to be here once again with the legendary Dana Crawford. She has done so much for this community, and we are in awe of you. Thank you so much, Dana, for being here and for all you do. We appreciate it. I also want to put to rest some rumors you might have heard that the Broncos quarterbacks are going to be added to the endangered places list this year. Not going to happen, at least not this year, but stay tuned. Okay. So this year's 3 sites tell very different chapters in the story of life on the plains here in Colorado. All are unique in their focus, but they're joined by a common thread: their crucial importance to the identity of those areas. And we start with the heart of the Jewish community in southeastern Colorado and the oldest continually operating temple, which until this past year faithfully served as congregation.
Borhues Adonai Hamvarach.
It has a warmth feeling that when you walk in here, and that makes you just feel very, very homey.
Asher Bohar Banu Mikol Ha'amim.
This has been my spiritual home for a long, long time. It's near and dear to my heart.
Benosan Lanu Estor So.
I can't think of being Jewish and not thinking of Temple Aaron.
The Rubin family has called Trinidad's Temple Aaron home for 70 years.
I was awed. I came from Albuquerque, New Mexico. They made me feel so at home that I never went back to Albuquerque.
For Catherine's son, Ron, growing up attending Temple Aaron shaped his faith.
Being isolated in a small Jewish community, in a small town, it did strengthen my Jewishness, I think. And at the time, I didn't realize it.
Also at that time, he didn't realize the importance of Temple Aaron to Colorado and the entire Southwest.
I had no idea that this was unique.
Temple Aaron is the oldest continually operating synagogue in Colorado. Some believe it's the oldest west of the Mississippi. Its roots go back to the westward expansion.
The first Jewish merchant came about 1865.
European settlers followed the railroad west as it pushed along the old Santa Fe Trail.
By 1875, there were a goodly number of Jewish merchants, and of course, it eventually formed Congregation Aaron.
Before long, that congregation bought a plot of land on a hill near the courthouse and built their permanent temple.
The architects were Bolger and Rapp, of course, who were very famous architects in this area of Colorado, New Mexico, and it was dedicated in 1889.
From the earliest days, the temple served the entire community through outreach programs.
Music, talks that were very impressive. We'd have as many as 100 non-Jewish people in attendance.
Over the years, the Jewish population of Trinidad dwindled as members moved to larger cities. More recently, upkeep on the century-old structure has largely depleted the endowment set up for its continued maintenance.
There is very, very little money and very few Jews.
That led the congregation last year to make the heartbreaking decision to close its doors.
It's difficult for me to talk about it without becoming emotional.
It's a hole in your heart and a hole in your spiritual life.
This is the first time I haven't seen my son Ron weep.
And this was the first year we haven't had our Jewish high holiday services. This year, 2016, since 1889, there had always been a service here.
127 years of community service ended with a for sale sign.
It was a decision we put off because it was an emotional thing, and it still is.
The task now, finding a buyer who will honor the legacy of the building.
The Jewish congregation and their influence here is a part of our history, and it would be a big chunk out of Trinidad to have them gone.
An historic easement will protect the building from being torn down. And the temple's place in history has attracted the attention of outside Jewish community groups.
We're just always interested in seeing that the Jewish history of Colorado, which predates Colorado becoming a state, is maintained.
Temple members have many ideas for future uses.
Come here and study and get away from the large cities and appreciate the wilderness that we have around Trinidad.
It would be nice to see it as a sacred space, kept this way. That's up to the new owners.
To find those new owners, they hope to draw on the sense of a broader community, which the temple has symbolized all along.
If there's a good story and a good vision of how this building can be preserved and help enrich the ongoing history here in Colorado, we may be able to bring in some funds.
Baruch Adonai Havarach Le'olam Voed.
And if the congregation's prayers are answered, Temple Aaron's service to Trinidad will continue for generations to come.
Everyone just feels very welcome here, and it's contagious. It's not just a place that you open and close. It's a wonderful, wonderful place.
Nosein HaTorah.
Well, our next site takes us to the farming community of New Raymer. This is one of many towns that popped up along the railroad tracks where settlers first crossed the eastern plains. Now, many of these sites have just simply faded away, but the residents of New Raymer still cling to the buildings that give their town its identity. A cold wind blows across Center Avenue in the town of New Raymer, one of a string of small rural towns which dot Colorado's eastern plains.
The train ran from Sterling to Cheyenne and back, and all of these little communities along here were whistle stops.
The Burlington and Missouri Railroad laid tracks through eastern Colorado in 1887. Along the way, they built depots to service the trains and foster growth.
Communities formed around them, towns, services, schools.
Raymer, as it was first called, was named for George Raymer, a civil engineer who helped build the line.
Without these little towns every 8 or 10 miles along the way, the whole area would never have been settled.
A new crop of homesteaders came in the 1910s, and with a name change to New Raymer, the community began to thrive. 100 years later, it's clear those glory days have faded. The buildings seem to melt back into the ground.
Yeah, that's a pretty good step.
But these walls can talk and still have a story to tell.
Post office was back there. I remember the window above the door, and the shelves were here and the counter.
Patty Ford grew up on a farm just south of town. She'd come into this grocery store every day after school.
The school buses with the school up north, they would stop here and allow the children to go in and get the mail. It was a hopping town. At first, I remember as a little girl, everybody used to come to town on a Saturday night, and the people that lived a long ways away would get their mail, and they would get their groceries, and we would socialize.
I was like second generation from the homesteaders.
For Lee Fritz, the corner gas station was where it's at.
The kids our age and stuff, or my age at that time and stuff, it was kind of a place where we'd meet and talk to some other friends and stuff, and just socialize, played a lot of cards in that station.
Yeah, I grew up here. It was a tavern from 48 to 58, a gathering place for everyone. And Mom is actually pregnant, expecting me. This is a place they could shoot pool, have a beer, and a hamburger. That's about all they served.
Trina Kauk's family owned that tavern and lived in the back. Shortly after Trina was born, her father became the town's postmaster. He closed the tavern and converted it into the post office.
It was a post office A lot of the guys would gather out front and gather to talk every morning about whatever was new. So it's kind of the central point of the town.
That changed in the 1950s and 1960s.
Well, I graduated in 1966, so at that point we had pretty much lost a lot of the stores and businesses in town. I think people just became more mobile, and if they had shopping to do, they would go to a bigger city. That if stuff wasn't offered here, they would travel to a bigger city, so they did everything there.
Since then, these buildings have sat along Center Avenue, used for little more than storage.
The ones that are surviving, I think it's a real surprise to most of us that they are. But this is great because I think they need to be preserved.
This is one of the few towns left on that railway line between Sterling and Cheyenne that is still standing, that still has an identity.
And now residents want to preserve that identity for future generations.
A lot of people migrate back to this area, and there's a reason why they do, and everybody that grew up here knows that reason, but it's hard to explain that reason.
And now Kyle has taken the first step in passing that along to the next generation. He purchased the Tavern Turn post office that Trina Kaut grew up in.
When I walked in, I went, wow, I think I could make something really neat out of this.
He's hoping to bring back a little of that weekend social scene that gave New Raymer life in its heyday.
They can come over on Fridays and Saturday nights after games, and they can hang out with their friends and play pool, and won't be a business because I owned a bar once and I'll never do that again.
Other residents hope to build on that passion.
I don't believe businesses will come back and thrive in Raymer anymore, but I do think that we can revitalize it in a new way to educate people who come here to visit and to learn and appreciate the prairies.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And before we move on to our last site, I want to recognize the two people who really put these incredible stories together, Kevin Strong and Doug Whitehead. Now, I have the privilege of working with these guys every day, so I see their work, every day, so I kind of take it for granted until I see something like this. Now, Doug shoots the great pictures, and Kevin puts the words to it. And you can tell by what you're seeing here the passion they have for storytelling and history. And would you stand up here and be recognized, Kevin Strong and Doug Whitehead? Doug is in the back there with a camera doing work, as always. Say hello, Doug. It's a privilege to work with you both, and thanks again for all you do. We really appreciate it. And now on to the last site from this year's list. Now, you could argue that the automobile played a part in putting these last two sites out of the picture. But our last site probably wouldn't have existed without the automobile, because as people became more mobile, they started looking for places to travel and visit. And one place they found stands proudly on the eastern plains in the town of Genoa. It's a lookout tower, and it's a tower with a personality all of its own.
We're 5,751 feet high. We'll go up and see the 6 states in a little bit.
For nearly 50 years, Jerry Chubbuck led visitors into his Genoa Tower Museum.
There are rooster glasses. He used to put on the old roosters to keep from pecking each other years ago.
Inside, a treasure trove of the unusual.
Have you ever seen a compass on a saddle? That old boy, he wasn't going to get lost.
Ran out of place to put anything, so he started nailing it all up on the ceiling.
The museum, located off of I-70 in Genoa, was Jerry's passion. His son grew up in its shadow.
Dad'd be out there till 9 o'clock at night in summertime with tourists and stuff like that.
The main attraction, this 60-foot tower. Jerry would boast, you can see 6 states from up here. Whether or not that's true, the view from the top has drawn many, like Patty Calhoun. She's the editor of Denver's Westward newspaper and has written about the tower many times.
The plains have their own beauty. It's stunning. You just stand here and look at the vista. You think about the history of what was going on in the West. And this is a destination all on its own. It is such an iconic landmark. You think about what it meant to the early tourists heading to the mountains.
Jerry Chubbuck was not the first showman to entertain the tourists here. That honor fell to Charles Gregory.
Oh, he was definitely the first visionary. People used to refer to him as the P.T. Barnum of Colorado.
Charles built the Genoa Tower in the 1920s and had his own spin on how to attract attention.
And he would stand on this tower with a megaphone read the license plates of the cars passing by, and yell, "Hey Ohio, get over here, get a drink, get some gas."
Its landmark status wasn't limited to passing automobiles.
The early aviation flying into Stapleton International Airport used the Genoa Tower as one of their landmarks to start their descent into Denver.
After World War II, it was a real bustling place. They came out here, they went to dances out here, they had parties out here. It was very much the social center of Genoa.
Walking through the labyrinth of hallways, it's easy to understand why.
This is the Indian Cafe.
A cafe every bit as unique as the tower.
There's painting on all the rocks, which was done by a Sioux Princess Ravenwing. There's like oyster shells and geodes and big chunks of mica made into this. He had a vision for it, and he wanted it to be this visual overload of stuff. I mean, this kind of stuff is really what the tower is about.
Charles Gregory's vision found a kindred spirit in Jerry Chubbuck.
When you'd come in, he'd catch everybody right here at the guest watch showcase.
Rooster glasses.
Jerry died a few years ago. The museum closed. The ceilings emptied. The collections auctioned off.
Took Dad a lifetime to collect all that stuff and then have it all sold in 3 days. It's sad to see all the stuff gone out of here.
Yet even with the artifacts gone, the spirit of the Genoa Tower spoke loudly.
It had to be saved, there was no question.
Patty Calhoun heard the calling.
So I talked to some of my smartest artist real estate friends, and we just all decided it was a good thing to do.
Together, the group of friends formed C6 States and purchased the tower from Jerry's family.
These are our friends, and it's like we wanted to do something together.
And together, they faced the age-old dilemma. Now that you have it, what do you do with it?
The long-term plan is hard to say because I'm not entirely sure we have one.
Enough of Jerry's stuff still lies buried in the corners.
If you had just bits and pieces, I think you could tell its story without being so overwhelming with boatloads of stuff hanging off the ceiling.
So you have to have some part of it that's just full of stuff, but not the whole place.
Whatever the future holds for the Genoa Tower, those involved insist the legacy of Charles Gregory and Jerry Chubbuck will live on.
Nobody ever messed this up. Everyone who came in here respected the vision of the people that had been here before, and that's what attracted them to this place.
After all, attraction is the name of the game in roadside America.
It's always the stops that you make and the experiences you see that really make that trip worthwhile. It's not so much the fast miles that you do after dark, it's all the things that you can put your hands on and see.
I'd like to see it come back, and I like to come visit, you know, and grandkids and stuff, tell them this is what Grandpa used to run.
I think the history of it, 90 years as an iconic piece of folk architecture, it's just a great story.
That is an incredible story. Will the folks from the World's Wonder View Tower please stand up and be recognized? Hey, all right. Excellent. Well, that'll do it for this year's editions to Colorado's Most Endangered Places. And we want to remind you there'll be a 30-minute special on CBS 4 sometime in March, so check your local listings. But again, it's a real privilege to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and let's do it again next year. Thank you.